Welcome to the deep dive. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining us today because we're about to plunge into a truly timeless work that offers not just historical insights, but profound practical wisdom you can use in your daily life right now.
That's the plan.
Our mission today is to take this stack of ancient wisdom, specifically Seneca's Letters from a Stoic, and really pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge for you, our listener.
That's exactly right. Think of this as maybe your shortcut to being genuinely well-informed, you know, understanding the core ideas without getting bogged down in, well, a dense ancient text.
Right.
We'll unpack some surprising facts, challenge maybe some common ideas about what Stoic actually means, and hopefully inject just enough humor to keep you hooked on these ideas because they really are incredibly relevant.
Our goal today goes far beyond just recounting historical facts about this incredible work. We really want to uncover those profound lessons and, practical applications for your modern life. Seneca himself had this really striking way of describing these letters. He called them helpful recommendations, which might be compared to the formulae of successful medications.
Right.
He said he'd use them on his own sores. How powerful is that metaphor? Philosophy as like self-medication for the soul.
It truly is a remarkable way to frame it, isn't it? It immediately grounds philosophy in something really tangible and deeply personal. He's not presenting some abstract system of thought, but a practical healing regimen. It suggests that our internal struggles, our anxieties, fears, desires are basically like ailments, and philosophy offers these tested remedies.
Right, tested on himself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So our purpose today is to make these ancient Stoic insights, well, easy to grasp, entertaining to explore, and maybe most importantly, directly applicable to your daily life.
Yeah.
We want to equip you with tools to navigate modern challenges, cultivate genuine inner peace, and truly discover what fulfillment looks like, not as some abstract ideal, but as, a lived experience.
Okay, so to really deep dive into these letters, I think first we need to understand the man behind them, Lucius Annaeus Seneca. From what I understand, he wasn't some, remote academic stuck in an ivory tower, was he? He lived right in the thick of things, a statesman, a philosopher, born way back in Cordoba, Spain, around 4 BC. How did someone like that even start navigating Roman politics? It sounds intense.
You've really hit on one of the most fascinating things about Seneca's life, this dual career. Despite, a relatively undistinguished family background and bouts of ill health, he had asthma, apparently.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he rose incredibly fast. He was a successful lawyer and orator, really active in both the legal world and Roman politics, which was quite something for someone not born into that Roman elite.
Wow.
It meant he had to be exceptionally talented, ambitious, and politically sharp, traits that maybe didn't always line up perfectly with that Stoic ideal of detachment we sometimes think of.
And his life was anything but quiet. Talk about a roller coaster. He was sentenced to death, twice?
Twice, yeah.
First by Caligula. That sounds terrifying. Though he got spared because someone convinced Caligula he was too sick to live anyway.
That's the story. Yeah. A bit of luck, perhaps.
And then again by Emperor Claudius. And on top of that, 8 years exiled on Corsica, allegedly for an affair with Caligula's sister. I mean, the sheer drama.
It's incredible.
This personal adversity, I have to think, must have just profoundly shaped his later ideas on coping with hardship.
Absolutely. Those experiences being so close to death, the isolation of exile, they absolutely shaped his perspective. They gave this immense weight, this authenticity to his writing.
Yeah, it wasn't just theory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
His philosophy isn't abstract. It's really grounded in his lived experience of survival, of resilience, facing these huge external pressures and, the whims of absolute power. When he talks about fear of death or inner calm, he's speaking from deep personal understanding, not just intellectual guesswork.
But then the pendulum swung back. He gets recalled from exile in AD 49, becomes a praetor, a high-ranking magistrate, and then gets this incredibly sensitive job, tutor to the young boy who would become Emperor Nero.
Right. High stakes.
And for about 8 years, Seneca was basically Nero's chief minister, guiding the early years of his reign. Our sources, like Tacitus, suggest the initial period was actually seen as a time of pretty sound government, largely thanks to Seneca.
That's the credit he often gets, and this period is where that tension in Seneca's life really comes to the surface. It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it? Here's Seneca writing about Stoic principles, simplicity, virtue, detachment from worldly stuff, accepting fate.
All the ideals.
Right. Yet he's operating right at the heart of this autocratic, power-hungry empire. navigating the imperial court, guiding Nero, of all people.
Yeah.
And sources mention how some later critics found this contradictory. They argued, a true Stoic like Cato the Younger would have stayed in politics till the bitter end, never compromising. But Seneca eventually chose to withdraw into philosophy. Some saw that as maybe lack of moral courage outside his study. It just highlights that brutal conflict between his ideals and the messy reality of power politics. One wrong step could mean death.
And, well, knowing the Nero story, that influence didn't last forever, did it?
No, sadly not.
Enemies? Jealous of his popularity? Maybe his wealth? Because despite talking about inner wealth, he did get pretty rich.
He did accumulate significant wealth, yes.
They turned Nero against him. Accusations flew immorality, too much popularity. Nero gets paranoid, and the end result. AD 65, after a plot against Nero is discovered, Seneca is forced by Nero to commit suicide.
His death, as it's described, was in itself a profoundly Stoic act. Facing the inevitable, he calmly cut his veins, apparently even dictating a final discourse to his friends as he died.
Wow.
It really brings to life the principles he wrote about accepting fate, being ready for death, keeping your composure even in the most extreme moments. It shows the philosophy wasn't just words for him, it was how he faced the ultimate test.
What's truly ironic, almost heartbreaking, is that his fame as an essayist and dramatist lasted for centuries, right up until maybe 200 or 300 years ago. And then, as our source puts it, unaccountably, he passed into literary oblivion, just forgotten. Imagine such profound wisdom just gathering dust.
It's quite something.
Thankfully, Robin Campbell, the translator of the Penguin Classics edition we're using, felt Seneca was overdue for discovery. He brought these letters back, which lets us dive into them today.
And that brings us perfectly to the core of our deep dive. Letters from a Stoic, the Epistulae Moralis. These weren't just, casual notes.
No.
They were written to Lucilius Jr., described as a hard-working, higher civil servant in Sicily who also dabbled in literature and philosophy.
Right, which makes them feel immediately relatable. Practical advice for a busy, smart person, kind of like you, our listener, trying to balance life's demands with a desire for deeper meaning.
Exactly. You can picture Lucilius juggling his job, trying to make sense of things, maybe feeling overwhelmed, and then getting these philosophical guides from Seneca.
Yeah. And sources suggest they were probably meant for publication anyway, maybe circulated privately first. It's interesting that we don't have any replies from Lucilius, right?
That strongly suggests they were more like carefully crafted essays, disguised as letters, meant for a wider audience.
And that medical metaphor Seneca used, comparing his advice to formulae of successful medications for his own sores.
Yeah, that's so insightful. It positions philosophy not as some abstract academic thing, but as this practical therapeutic tool for self-improvement, for healing the soul.
Right.
It's about personal transformation, tackling internal issues like anxiety, fear, destructive desires. He's basically saying, look, I've tried these prescriptions on myself. They worked for me. Now I'm sharing them. Makes it incredibly accessible, immediately relevant. Self-help in the truest sense.
And Seneca's writing style itself is pretty unique. It's described as a mix of lively, not to say colloquial, conversation and a serious treatise. What's really fascinating is how eclectic it is. He even quotes from the rival Epicurean school in the first 30 letters. Now, given the philosophical rivalries back then, how weird was that? Was that like, I don't know, a Democrat quoting Reagan today?
That's a great analogy. And yes, it was quite remarkable. It really shows a mind open to truth wherever he found it, not just sticking to his own philosophical team.
Yeah.
It kind of challenges our modern intellectual tribalism, doesn't it? Where you only quote your side. He wasn't saying Epicureanism was right, just here's a useful truth, who cares where it came from?
That approach must have made his work way more accessible, more comprehensive. It suggests real intellectual honesty.
I think so. A commitment to truth over dogma.
But his style wasn't universally loved, was it? He aimed for terseness, epigrammatic brevity, that easy conversational feel. But some found it, dazzled and fatigued.
Right. The grammarian Fronto complained his sentences often just repeat the same thought, clothed in constantly different guises, over and over again.
And Macaulay famously compared reading Seneca to dining on nothing but anchovy sauce.
Small laugh, which, even if you like anchovy sauce.
Right. A little goes a long way.
Yeah.
Too much might be overwhelming.
Exactly. And that contrast is important. Even profound wisdom needs to land well. While Seneca aimed for impact, the sheer density, maybe the repetition, could definitely be tiring for some readers. It shows that good translation isn't just words, it's making it digestible for a modern audience.
Which brings us back to the translator, Robin Campbell. Barrister, classical scholar, he had a good perspective. And he explicitly said he wanted to temper Seneca's style a bit for modern English readers, make it read more naturally, which reinforces our mission today. Make this ancient wisdom easy, entertaining, and really applicable for you. Okay, let's move from Seneca the man to the heart of his philosophy, cultivating that inner resilience. He starts strong in letter 2 with this idea: to be everywhere is to be nowhere. Sounds like advice for today's digital world, doesn't it?
It really does, but he takes it deeper than just, say, avoiding multitasking.
Yeah, he calls this restlessness symptomatic of a sick mind. What's that imply about our internal state?
That's the core of it. It's not just about what we're doing outside, but our internal scatteredness. Seneca says, nothing hinders a cure so much as frequent changes of treatment. He uses that vivid analogy: food that is vomited up as soon as it is eaten is not assimilated into the body. The insight is that real growth isn't about exposure to many things, but deep absorption of a few.
Right.
Whether it's books, ideas, skills, even relationships, if we just flit around without really digesting, nothing becomes part of us. The sickness isn't just inefficiency, it's a soul lacking grounding, always chasing the next new thing.
So it's not just what you consume, but how you engage with anything: relationships, work, learning. In our age of infinite scrolling and constant pings, this is almost a revolutionary act of self-discipline.
It really is.
For you, our listener, the challenge isn't just picking one book, maybe, but committing to truly engaging deeply with one area, one skill, one idea, until it genuinely shifts your perspective and actions. What's the area in your life where you're maybe jumping around too much? How could focusing deeply change that?
And this focused study leads right into the critical practice of self-reflection. In letter X16, Seneca draws a sharp line. Making noble resolutions is not as important as keeping the resolutions you have made already.
Ooh, that hits home. Intentions versus action.
Exactly. He's not impressed by grand plans, but by consistent follow-through. He stresses the need for daily reflection to strengthen wisdom, to fortify your pertinacity until the will to good becomes a disposition to good.
Disposition, like it becomes second nature.
Yeah, precisely. It's about consistent, deliberate effort, making virtue a habit, turning good intentions into ingrained character. It's the difference between knowing the right thing and actually doing it, day after day.
That's profound. It really challenges us to look at our own progress. Are we just gathering info, or are we actually changing? Seneca asks it directly. Consider above all else whether you've advanced in philosophy or just in actual years.
Small laugh. Yeah, that's a bit of a gut check, isn't it?
Totally. Are you just older or are you wiser?
Precisely. That's the key difference between just collecting facts and achieving real understanding that transforms who you are. You can read all the books, go to all the workshops, but if that knowledge doesn't lead to a real shift in how you see yourself, how you act, how you treat others, then it's just raw data, not wisdom.
Right.
Wisdom, for Seneca, is lived. It's about inner growth showing up in your outward character.
Okay, shifting gears a bit. Let's talk about something that might sound, well, a little morbid at first.
Right.
Embracing discomfort, especially the fear of death. Seneca had a very personal connection to this, didn't he?
He really did. In letters 53 and LXC7, he vividly describes this breathing ailment he suffered from. The doctors apparently called it rehearsing death.
Rehearsing death.
Yeah, he describes these intense, suffocating attacks where he'd be gasping for air. It sounds truly awful.
But his personal struggle gave him this unique perspective on mortality, right?
Absolutely. He found comfort in the Stoic idea that death is just not being. What that is like, I know already. It will be the same after me as it was before me. This acceptance, this familiarity with non-existence from his own mini-deaths during attacks, let him face his suffering in the end with, well, remarkable calm. He wasn't just theorizing, he was living it, or rather dying it a little bit at a time.
And he even quotes Epicurus again, the rival, saying, "It is a very good thing to familiarize oneself with death." Now, for many people, that sounds incredibly dark. Why would you want to rehearse death? Isn't life about avoiding that thought?
That's the common reaction, sure. But it's not about being morbid. Seneca argues, a person who has learned how to die has unlearned how to be a slave.
Unlearned how to be a slave. How so?
It connects directly to freedom. If you're not afraid of death, you're not enslaved by external powers, by tyrants, by threats of prison or pain. You have an open door. Your freedom is total because the worst they can do, death holds no terror.
Ah, I see.
The only real chain, he says, is our love of life. Not that we should get rid of it, but we need to loosen its grip so we're ready when needed, not terrified.
What a powerful reframe. turning something feared into a source of ultimate freedom. And he also says, life is never incomplete if it is an honorable one. At whatever point you leave life, if you leave it in the right way, it is a whole.
Exactly. It's not about length of life, but quality.
So it's not about living a long time, but living well.
Precisely. It redefines mortality. It's not just a scary end, but a potential culmination of a virtuous life. The quality, how you live, your character outweighs the quantity. Daily awareness of mortality, then, isn't morbid, it's a motivator. Live fully, with purpose, aligned with your values now.
Make each day count, because it might be the whole story.
In a sense, yes. Live so completely that if today was it, you'd feel it was a whole meaningful life.
Now, Seneca didn't just think about death. He actively practiced embracing discomfort as a kind of training. In letter 8, he talks about this Saturnalia challenge, which sounds wild because Saturnalia was the big Roman party time, right?
Yeah.
Feasting, gifts.
Total indulgence, yes. A time of excess.
And Seneca suggests that during this party month, you should deliberately set aside days for, like, plainest of food and very little of it, rough clothing, and then ask yourself, is this what one used to dread?
It's a brilliant form of voluntary austerity, like a soldier's training. He says, in times of security, the spirit should be preparing itself to deal with difficult times.
Practicing hardship when things are good.
Exactly, like drills against a phantom enemy so you're ready for the real thing. It builds mental and emotional muscle. It proves to yourself, through experience, that security from care is not dependent on fortune.
You learn you can handle discomfort. That happiness isn't tied to luxuries.
Right, you discover your own resilience. Even Epicurus, the pleasure seeker, practiced this. He bragged he could eat for less than a halfpenny, showing that simple, basic pleasures were enough for real contentment.
So it's not about suffering for its own sake.
No, not at all. It's about realizing your well-being isn't truly dependent on external comforts. It's about proving your adaptability.
For us today, this could translate into things like maybe intermittent fasting, simpler meals sometimes, a digital detox, cold showers even.
Or just walking instead of driving when you could. Small, deliberate challenges.
Yeah, they build that mental muscle, prove we're capable of more than we might think. Like from external discomfort to inner peace amidst chaos. Seneca, in Letter Veiled the Eye, gives this incredibly vivid and honestly relatable description of his noisy apartment over a public bathhouse. Sounds like modern city life.
Oh, the bathhouse babble. It's fantastic. He describes the grunts of guys lifting weights, hissings, and strident gasps.
Less slightly.
The smack of a hand pummeling his shoulders, a ball player shouting, brawls, thieves being caught, bath singers, splashers, the shrill hair remover guy.
Oh, man.
Hawkers selling sausages and pastries. You can just hear the ancient Roman cacophony.
It's amazing. And he makes this key point. Voices are more inclined to distract one than general noise. Noise just fills your ears, but voices grab your attention.
Right. And he found intermittent noise worse than a constant drone because it keeps pulling you out of focus. I think we can all relate to that.
Definitely. The sudden sound is often worse, but what's fascinating is how he dealt with it.
This is the really amazing part. Despite all this chaos outside, he says, I force my mind to become self-absorbed and not let outside things distract it. The key, he says, is that there can be absolute bedlam without so long as there is no commotion within.
Wow. So if your inner world is calm, the outer noise doesn't matter as much.
Essentially, yes. If your mind is focused, organized, the external chaos becomes less intrusive. It's a profound statement on the power of internal control. The real noise isn't outside. It's the commotion we allow inside.
That's powerful. True peace isn't finding a quiet spot. It's cultivating a quiet mind. And he distinguishes between real rest and just being idle, right? Night doesn't remove worries, just brings a change of anxieties.
True serenity comes from the free development of a sound mind. Inactivity, just doing nothing, can actually lead to restlessness, a skittish mind. He says, quite pointedly, people who are really busy never have enough time to become skittish.
So it's about purposeful activity, not just idleness.
Exactly. It's a critical insight for managing internal noise, especially today. It's not about escaping distractions, but building a mind undisturbed by them.
So for you, the listener, this might mean practical things like noise-canceling headphones, sure.
Yeah.
Or setting quiet times, single tasking.
But more deeply, it's about tackling internal anxieties and desires through meaningful activity, not just passive consumption or avoidance. True peace comes from engaging with life intentionally, not hiding from it.
Moving beyond inner resilience, let's explore living with purpose, virtue, relationships, avoiding excess. A key Stoic idea Seneca explores is living in accordance with nature. We hear that phrase, but what did it really mean for him?
Well, it doesn't mean living like an animal just by instinct. For Seneca, it means living according to our specific nature, which is defined by the inborn gift of reason.
Ah, okay, reason is key.
Absolutely. It's about cultivating that reason, disciplining pleasures and passions, putting the mind and soul in charge of the body and emotions. It's about conquering pain, grief, superstition, and the fear of death.
And realizing that famous Stoic line, there's nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so.
Right. Which isn't denial, but understanding that our perception, our internal response, shapes our experience of external events.
And this leads to the supreme ideal, the summum bonum. Not just good, like feeling pleasant, but the ultimate goal for humans.
Exactly. The highest good. And for Stoics, this wasn't just moral goodness, as we might think of virtue today. It was the peak of human flourishing, complete excellence of character.
Our sources summarize it as combining 4 cardinal virtues: wisdom or moral insight, courage, self-control, and justice, or upright dealing.
It wasn't just doing good things, but fundamentally being a good person, cultivating this internal state of perfect alignment that external stuff couldn't shake.
And this ideal makes a person truly self-sufficient, immune to suffering, superior to luck or fortune.
That's the idea. True worth, true happiness, true security are found within. They're cultivated by our own rational choices and character, not dependent on external things we can't control, like wealth or status, as what Fortuna throws at us.
It shifts the whole game inward.
Completely. The locus of control and fulfillment moves from the external to the internal.
And this focus on inner wealth is a huge theme, isn't it? Seneca quotes Epicurus again. If you shape your life according to nature, you will never be poor. If according to people's opinions, you will never be rich.
It's such a powerful quote. Nature's wants, he says, are small food, shelter, warmth, the basics. But opinions' wants, they're limitless, always expanding, never satisfied.
He really lays into materialism, doesn't he? It sounds almost like he's critiquing our modern consumer culture.
Oh, absolutely. He argues that constantly chasing possessions will only induce in you a craving for even bigger things. It's that hedonic treadmill more just makes you want more.
So true pride isn't in stuff, but in what is his very own.
Right.
His spirit, his perfected reason.
Exactly. And it challenges us, you, the listener, to reflect on your own desires. Are they natural and limited, driven by real needs? Or are they fueled by external opinions, by comparing yourself to others, by that endless, unsatisfying quest for more? How might shifting that perspective redefine success for you, away from just accumulation?
Another key part of living with purpose is relationships, human connection. In Letter 9, Seneca talks about the wise man and friendship. He says a wise man needs friends and wants as many of them as possible, but not to enable him to lead a happy life. This he will have even without friends.
That sounds a bit cold at first, doesn't it?
It can sound that way, yeah. Like friends are just optional extras.
Right. He says happiness is homegrown, wholly self-developed.
But it's a crucial Stoic point. What Seneca means is your fundamental happiness shouldn't depend on externals, including friends. True happiness is internal, from your virtue and reason. You cultivate it within, you don't get it from others.
Because if your happiness depends on friends, you're vulnerable if you lose them or if they're not around.
Exactly. But paradoxically, he says there's great pleasure in beginning and building up a new one. He quotes Attalus, saying it was more of a pleasure to make a friend than to have one.
Like an artist enjoying the process of painting more than the finished picture. Precisely. The joy is in the process, the act of building the connection, not just having the friend as a finished product.
That's a really deep insight. It makes friendship active, a verb, not just a noun.
Absolutely. And then Seneca tells that amazing story about Stilbo, the philosopher whose town was destroyed, lost everything home, wealth, wife, children.
Yeah, and Demetrius, the city sacker, asked him if he lost anything.
And Stilbo says, I have all my valuables with me, meaning his character, justice, goodness, enlightenment, things no army could take away.
Wow. That really hammers home the Stoic idea of what's truly ours, our inner state.
It really does, and it prompts that question for all of us.
Yeah.
What are your valuables that can't be taken away? Are you investing in those internal treasures?
This leads to how we treat others and ourselves. Seneca was incredibly progressive for his time about slavery, wasn't he? In Letter XC7, he laughs at those people who think it degrading for a man to eat with his slave.
He argues forcefully, radically for that era that they're human beings, humble friends, our fellow slaves.
Fellow slaves, meaning we're all kind of subject to fortune.
That's the sense. We're all in this together, subject to larger forces. It was a powerful moral stand in a society where slaves were often just property, treated terribly. He slammed the arrogance of masters gorging themselves while slaves stood silently by. He wanted a basic recognition of shared humanity.
And he basically uses the golden rule, but adds that Roman twist. Treat your inferiors in the way in which you would like to be treated by your own superiors.
And reminds them, your own master has just as much power over you. It fosters empathy, humility, recognize your own vulnerability, treat others with compassion.
It connects to self-control too, doesn't it? True strength isn't dominating others.
Exactly. Seneca knew real strength was inner virtue, self-control. He called anger a mental raving, something to avoid for your own sanity. He says chillingly, to be feared is to fear. No one has been able to strike terror into others and at the same time enjoy peace of mind himself.
That's powerful. Being feared creates its own prison of anxiety.
Absolutely. True power is power over yourself.
And Seneca gives this deeply moving perspective on living for others too. In letter LXC8, he talks about being really sick, tempted by suicide. But the thought of his aging father, the kindest of fathers, stopped him. He says, having in mind not how bravely I was capable of dying, but how far from bravely he was capable of bearing the loss, I commanded myself to live.
It's beautiful.
He even says, there are times when even to live is an act of bravery.
It's such a profound expression of duty, of love. It shows Stoicism isn't cold detachment. It's about rational self-control, choosing actions aligned with virtue, which includes compassion, responsibility to loved ones.
He felt his spirit would pass to his friends, influencing them even after death.
Right. A kind of moral legacy. He asserts, the good man should go on living as long as he ought to, not just as long as he likes. It's a call to consider our impact. Sometimes bravery is enduring for others, fulfilling our duties.
So this really makes you think, how do we treat people in less powerful positions? Are we embodying that empathy, that humility? Do we recognize that real strength is self-control, not dominance or making others afraid? Now, while Seneca champions virtue and connection, he's also very aware of the dangers of what he calls unnatural living and excess. Letter CXT2, he really goes after people who invert the functions of day and night.
He calls them antipodes living in the same city, people who have never seen the sun rise or set. He says they're as weird as birds that fly by night, their souls dazed and befogged.
Wow, so flipping day-night is seen as a sign of deep spiritual sickness, a disharmony with nature.
Exactly, it's humans actively fighting their own natural rhythms.
And he gives other examples of vices against nature, right? Drinking on an empty stomach, men wearing women's clothes, even weirder stuff like torturing boys to keep them looking young.
And environmental excesses, too. Wanting roses in winter, forcing lilies out of season, orchards on rooftops, heated baths built in the sea.
It all sounds so over the top, kind of ridiculous.
And that's his point. These are people doing something not just extravagant, but really out of the ordinary just to get noticed. The root cause, Seneca thinks, is a disdain for a normal existence.
They want to be talked about, stand out, because maybe they feel empty inside.
That seems to be the implication. They need external validation rather than finding inner contentment.
It makes me think about our modern obsession with unique experiences, showing off online, avoiding being basic. Seneca seems to be tapping into that fundamental human urge to be seen, even if it leads to absurdity.
Exactly. And for Stoics, chasing external validation is a huge mistake. The normal existence he values is one aligned with reason, with the natural order. When you constantly fight that staying up all night, demanding out-of-season luxuries, you're creating inner chaos.
You're rowing against the stream, as he puts it.
Right. And that takes huge, exhausting effort. It leads to spiritual fatigue. It's not just morally wrong. It's practically inefficient and unsatisfying.
His final line on it sums it up. For those who follow nature, everything is easy and straightforward, whereas for those who fight against her life, is just like rowing against the stream.
It's a profound call for simplicity, for alignment with our rational nature. It invites us to look at our own habits. Are we driven by real needs or artificial desires for status that just create struggle? How might embracing normal and simple actually boost our well-being in a world obsessed with excess? What peace do we sacrifice for show?
This really leads into the true purpose of philosophy for Seneca. It's way more than just learning stuff. It's a way of life, not just a commercial skill. He contrasts liberal studies with true wisdom in letters LX, XD8, and C8.
Right. He says most liberal studies, literature, music, geometry, that do not aspire to any knowledge of how to make a man a better person, let alone actually do it.
They might prepare the mind, sharpen the intellect.
But they don't carry the personality all the way there to virtue and real freedom. For Seneca, the only truly liberal study, the one that makes you free, is the pursuit of wisdom. Philosophy is transformation.
He's pretty harsh on pedantry, isn't he? Useless knowledge. He slams those pedantic, irritating, tactless, self-satisfied bores, learning stuff they'll never need.
Small f. Yeah, he brings up Didymus, that scholar who supposedly wrote 4,000 works on trivial things like Homer's birthplace or Sappho's partners.
4,000 on that.
Seneca quips he'd feel sorry for him if he'd merely read so many useless works, let alone written them. It highlights philosophy's real goal with that punchy contrast. Instead of wanting people to say, what a learned person, we should aim for the much less fashionable label, what a good man.
Character over credential.
Exactly. Knowledge for its own sake, if it doesn't make you a better person, is hollow.
And he shoots down the idea that philosophers invented practical things like tools or farming.
Right. He says it was human ingenuity, not wisdom, which discovered all that. Philosophy does not train men's hands. She is the instructors of men's minds.
A clear distinction.
Crucial for him. It's not about inventions or showing off obscure facts or winning debates. It's about transforming your inner self, shaping your mind and soul to live virtuously. It makes us ask, how much of our own learning today is for show versus genuine growth? Are we learning to be learned or learning to be good and live well?
So if philosophy isn't a commercial skill or about useless facts, what is the philosopher's duty? Seneca says it's healing minds and practicing truth. In Letter XL, he says a philosopher's delivery should be plain and unadorned, not a noisy, promiscuous torrent like some marketplace hawker.
Yeah, he argues that language meant for healing needs to penetrate, to really sink in and be absorbed. Remember the food analogy.
Right. It needs to stay with you.
And he believed people's speech matches their lives. A flowery or messy style could indicate a diseased community or a person whose spirit has also come to grief. He uses Maecenas, the rich statesman, as an example. His sloppy, indulgent nature showed up in his undisciplined writing. No inner coherence.
That's fascinating. Style, appearance, inner character, all linked. Authenticity or the lack of it. And Seneca is crystal clear about the philosopher's urgent mission, isn't he? This isn't the place for fun. You're called in to help the unhappy.
You're pledged to bring succor to the shipwrecked, to those in captivity, to the sick, the needy, and men, placing their heads beneath the executioner's uplifted axe.
Wow. That's intense.
It really gets to the practical, compassionate heart of his philosophy. It's not abstract games. It's about easing fundamental human suffering. And he insists on practice over preaching. He rips into those who study philosophy like a trade but live completely differently.
He saw right through hypocrisy.
Absolutely. The true test is, let them put their preaching into practice. It's a powerful call for authenticity. Live the principles you talk about.
And what are they putting into practice? Seneca reminds us that in every one of us, nature has laid the foundations or sown the seeds of the virtues. The philosopher's job isn't to implant something new,
but to awaken what's already there. It highlights that innate capacity we all have for goodness, for wisdom. The philosopher helps us rediscover and cultivate that potential, like tending a garden inside us.
So for you, our listener, it means asking. What does it mean for you to practice what you preach? How can your words and actions authentically reflect the character you aspire to, consistently, so your life itself becomes proof of the wisdom you seek? As we wrap up this deep dive into Seneca's Letters from a Stoic, we really hope you've gained some impactful lessons that resonate with your life today. We've looked at the importance of focused learning over just skimming the surface.
Right. Quality over quantity.
How cultivating inner peace can shield you from external chaos, and why living in harmony with your true nature and valuing real virtue over fleeting wealth can lead to, well, deeper fulfillment.
We've also touched on the art of meaningful relationships, treating everyone with empathy and humility, and understanding that real strength is self-control, not dominating others. And maybe most importantly, seeing philosophy as Seneca did not as some dusty academic subject, but as a practical healing guide for life, a medication for the soul to navigate our shared human challenges.
This ancient wisdom, written nearly 2,000 years ago, feels incredibly relevant for our complex modern world, dealing with information overload, anxiety, social pressures, and just that universal search for a meaningful life.
The problems he tackled are, at their heart, human problems, which means his solutions, his insights, still apply. Seneca constantly reminds us that life's finest days fly first.
That is hard.
It's not meant to cause despair, but to spark immediate conscious action. Time is precious, non-renewable. So the question for you is, what one concrete thing are you going to seize today? One habit to refine, one perspective to adopt, one action to take to ensure you're living your best life now, rather than just waiting for some uncertain future.